You are listening to 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair. My name is Elian Saldivar, and I am joined today by Teresa Fiore, Professor of Italian and Insera Chair in Italian and Italian American Studies in the World Language and Cultures Department here at Montclair State University. Hi, Teresa. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Teresa has recently worked in the publishing as a co-translator with Daniela Chaudhary Fiore of an autobiographical novel originally published by Nikolai Prestia called Farewell to Russia, Memories of When I Was Kola. My first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Yes, this book is often referred to as a book about adoption, but in reality, it is a book in which the author thinks of himself as a young kid going through the experience of growing up in a very challenged family characterized by poverty, negligence, abuse, prostitution, and addiction, and remaining an orphan along with his sister, and being placed in not one but 3 orphanages over time. So the book is really about his experience in these orphanages, his relationship to a special family member, an aunt, that remained a connection to the family of origin, the experience with other kids in the orphanage system, with a director who inspired him to be a book reader and eventually a writer of books, a nurse who took care of him while he was hospitalized, and eventually the meeting with the couple from Italy, from Sicily in particular, who became the new set of parents for him. So adoption is really at the end of this book, which is essentially what is called an autofiction. So it's not strictly speaking an autobiography, it's not a memoir, it's someplace between invention and personal memory.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you began working on this project, or how you found the opportunity to work for this project?
Yes, I'm really glad to be able to share this because it actually all started with a radio program. A friend of mine told me that he had heard this interview with Nikolai Prestia, the author, in a program called Fahrenheit, which is very popular in Italy. It's through the state radio system, like PBS in the United States, and it's very well respected. So I thought, well, this is something worth looking into. I'm an adoptive mother myself, and so he thought that it would be a very interesting book for me. And of course, it touched me deeply, in particular because it doesn't necessarily talk about adoption, as I said, but it talks about what happens to children before they get adopted. Quite often we think of them from the point when they're adopted and how they grow. But in this case, I think the novel does a very important job at shedding light on what precedes the adoption, in particular the adoption of older children whose story is seldom told. So after listening to that radio program, I looked for Nikolai on the web. I found him, and I was able to actually invite him to Montclair State, but only virtually, because in those days with COVID, we could only do things online.
Yeah.
And that's how the whole relationship started, including the involvement of my daughter in this project.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you and your daughter, or your adopted daughter, were working on this project together. What led to that choice to work on this book together?
Right. It's a perfect segue from what I was saying before, because while we were preparing for this Zoom meeting, the event online, where Nikolai actually talked about the book that had been published in Italian in 2021 with the title of Das Vidania, I asked my daughter to actually read the book because her story is in some ways similar to that of Nikolai's. And I asked her whether she would be interested in translating some parts of it, because she is a Spanish speaker. She was born in Colombia. She's also an English speaker. Since she has moved here, of course, this became the primary language, but she's also fluent in Italian. And she agreed. She was very intrigued by the book, of course. And she translated a few parts, and I was really struck by what she was doing and decided to go ahead and propose it to the Avoy series at Rutgers University Press. Other Voices in Italian is a series devoted to books in Italian that get translated into English. And I'm really grateful to Alessandro Vettori and then Elish Kierans and Sandra Waters and everybody else at Rutgers University Press for making this possible.
I told you off air, and for our listeners who do not know, I am a translation student in Spanish, so I'm very interested in the process that you took for this book. Can you give us a little bit of some of the first steps that you took when you started this translation project?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I thought that since Daniela had started with the translation, this would be the best way to continue. So she has been the first translator in terms of chronological sequence. So for every part that she translated, then I would go back and edit and had a bit of a back and forth with her. That's how we approached it. Very, very long time, mostly because Daniela, perhaps because she's an adolescent, because, perhaps because, we live in an era of short attention span, but was doing one page at a time and was basically translating as she was reading, which I thought was very unusual and probably not too orthodox. But then I actually started reading about how Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude was translated. And so he typed it as he read it page by page. So I thought that Daniela was actually using the technique of a very important translator of a Colombian author. An interesting coincidence.
Since this book is being translated from Italian into English, how did you manage some of the challenges that is translating cultural references that the author may have mentioned in the book?
Yes, so this is actually a complicated issue in this book because Nikolai was a Russian speaker. The book is called Das Vidanya, which is Russian for farewell, and that's why the book is titled Farewell to Russia. But he wrote in Italian. So already the book is a translation in his mind. He also claims that he has lost Russian completely by moving to Italy when he was roughly 8. And the book is quite plain. So it's actually a very accessible language that certainly my daughter could handle. And so there weren't too many challenges from a strictly linguistic point of view. He also used some Russian words, which we decided to keep, but also to provide a translation for. And so there were just a few spots when we had to make some decisions, which were mostly related to register. I think this was the main challenge because the book is written by Nikolai Prestia, an adult man, a writer, who's actually inserting himself into the kid Kola. That's why the subtitle Memories of When I Was Kola. And so there are moments when there's a little bit of a short circuit between the adult and the kid. And we had to make decisions about how to render that.
Going back to some of the courses of translation that I've taken, AI is a topic that is heavily discussed in our classes. I wanted to ask if AI played any role in your process for this project, and if it didn't, how do you think AI is going to impact translators in the future?
This is a great question, and to be honest with you, I don't embrace AI. I don't think we were even calling it that way when the book, the translation started. But of course, we had Google Translate. I stayed away from it, but inevitably for an adolescent, it was a big draw, a big magnet, and I learned to actually see the relevance of it to a degree, right? Here again, I would like to actually quote writer Liz McSkeen. This is taken actually from the translator's note that I wrote for the book. Literal translation, she writes, perhaps supported by technology, might help with the process of recasting an entire work of literature in another language, but it cannot do the work that needs to be done, right? And so obviously we realized that there were so many subtleties in terms of register that needed our intervention. And also, let's put it plainly, Google Translate does not distinguish between gender when it translates from, for example, Italian into English, because in Italian we don't use the pronouns. So Google Translate makes it up, and sometimes it's actually a funny result that you see men and women popping up that are not expected.
Yeah. This book was published on March 10th through the Rutgers University Press. After having worked on this project, what do you hope readers can take away from it?
Well, I hope that they're going to read a book about older adoptees. As I said before, this story is rarely told. It is a story that is also somewhat similar to foster children's stories. And it's a book about trauma and the long-term impact of trauma. It is also a book about what happens to a country like Russia in the 1990s that comes apart, and with it, its population. And so the struggles of these single woman selling her body to make a living to support two kids becomes a really symbolic, in a way, of a society that is crumbling down. The book is so much about the presence of a mother who has disappeared, and the search for her is very, very poetic, very, very lyrical, and it is represented by the green apple that we see on the cover of the book, which on the cover is next to a window. Kola spends a lot of time in the orphanage looking out of the window, searching for another opportunity, which eventually comes with adoption. But I think the book really shows how adoption is part of a longer story, and that respecting what happens to these children's lives before they get adopted is actually a must.
All right, thank you so much. Those are all the questions that I have, but is there anything you would like to add?
Sure. I would like to also invite the readers to read the book, not just for the content that I have described, but precisely as you're suggesting, as an exercise in translation. Because if you think that my daughter also translated it into a language that is not hers, really there are so many layers to this, Russian, Italian, Spanish, English. And I think Loredana Polezzi, who's a specialist in translation studies, really captured this in the foreword of the book. And I see that the book is being much appreciated already based on the reviews that I've seen online. But I really hope that there's the opportunity to reflect on it like you have as a student of translation in terms of the process of making it possible in English.
All right. Thank you so much. From WMSC News, my name is Elian Saldivar.